I take a 1.5 kilo size chook and I place that into a large pot. Then I pour over enough water to cover the chicken, and that was 2.5 litres. And now I take it and put it on the stove over a high heat until it comes to the boil. When it's come to the boil, I just reduce the heat to low and let it gently simmer for about 45 minutes. And during this time, I just take off any scum that comes to the surface. And while the chicken is simmering away, I just prepare the vegetables to flavour the stock. And I'll just take a large onion, a large carrot and a large piece of celery, and I just dice them roughly. Then I take 3 cloves of garlic, which I just remove the skin, and I also get 1 bay leaf, a few parsley stems, and I usually use fresh thyme, but I'm out of it, so I'll just put a half a teaspoon of dried thyme, a teaspoon or so of peppercorns, which I just lightly crush to release their flavour. And that's what I use to flavour the stock. Then after 45 minutes, put these soup vegetables into the stock with the chicken, together with 2 teaspoons of salt. And if you find the water has evaporated a bit, you can just top it up with a little bit more water, and I bring that back to the boil, and then I'm going to simmer it for a further 45 minutes. And while the chicken is simmering away, I'm going to prepare the vegetables that actually go into the fricassee. And what I've got here is 3 carrots, about 350 grams of mushrooms. I've got a large leek and a bunch of asparagus, which is in season at the moment, which is awesome. With the carrots, I just cut them in half and then I slice them into slices. And I'll be cooking the carrots and the asparagus first in the broth, so I'll put them in the same bowl. And with the asparagus, I just cut it into sort of rough pieces. And these are quite large, these mushrooms, so I'll cut them into quarters. And with the leek, I just remove the tough end bit and I just halve it down the middle and then cut it into slices. Leeks have a tendency to have a bit of dirt, so what I like to do is just pop them in a bowl and give them a good wash with some water. And that's my vegetables prepped for the next step. The chicken's been boiling away for an hour and a half now. And using tongs, I'm going to carefully remove the chicken. And it's so tender that it's falling apart. And I'll put that aside and wait till it cools down a bit. And I carefully strain the stock. So I only need about 4 cups of this, about a litre. Anything extra, I'll just keep it because it's such a great chicken stock, and I'll freeze it. And I pour that into a large pot and I place it on the stove. I bring the stock to the boil and then I add the asparagus and the carrots and I let them cook for about 10 minutes or so until they're pretty tender. And now I just add the mushrooms and the leeks. And I bring it back to the boil and simmer them for about 5 more minutes. And after 5 minutes, I turn the heat off and bring it over to the bench. And I strain the stock once more. And then I let everything cool down. And the next step is putting it all together. While my stock is cooling down, I can work on the chicken because that's cooled down enough to handle now. And all I'm going to do is remove the meat from the bones and discard the skin. And using your hands is a great way to do this because you can feel for bones like these little ones. So I just take every little bit of meat off this chicken. Even the wings have a tiny bit of meat there that I can use. And I just cut the breast into bite-sized pieces, or you can just pull it apart with your hands and shred it that way. And I'll make sure I get every little bit of meat off the carcass. And that's all the meat. So into my pot, I put 60 grams of butter. And once the butter starts to foam and sizzle, I add 2 big tablespoons of plain flour. And I cook that flour out for a couple of minutes. and I'll switch over to a whisk. Then I add the liquid. Now first of all I add about 1/2 cup of wine, and that absorbs pretty quick. And then I add my lovely stock, and I'll whisk this around over a medium heat until it's thickened up, and it won't take that long. And then I taste it for seasoning, and I add a little bit more salt, a bit of pepper, about a tablespoon of lemon juice, and just about 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. And now I add about 1/2 cup of cream. I have another taste to make sure I've got my seasonings right. And I'm just going to add a little bit more cream, about 1 teaspoon of sugar. And now I add back the chicken and the vegetables. If you're not a fan of wine in cooking, you mightn't like the wine addition to this, so just leave it out and add a bit more reserve stock. Needs a little bit more salt and maybe a little bit more nutmeg. And that is chicken fricassee. Yeah!